walk through the what's new in Composer 2012. And we're gonna touch on a lot of different areas. I'll show you a couple different examples. It's not going to be a real long presentation, but I think you're gonna like a lot of the things that were added in this newest release. So we'll kind of dive in here. So first off, one of the things that was added is just the addition of kind of organizing the information into, as it relates to rendering the item into its own tab. And this is nice because it's all in one place now. You don't have to go searching for a lot of the commonly used commands related to how you're rendering the model out. So just to kind of give you a taste of some of these. For instance, if we go into, let's render it as smooth, this specific example. The last release we added what's called per pixel lighting. And what per pixel lighting allows me to do is basically, right now the item looks pretty shiny for the most part, and what per pixel lighting does is that it tones that down. So you're going to notice a difference here when I turn it on, that a lot of the brashness of the shadow or of the highlight on the parts goes away. So I'm just going to toggle it on and off just so you can kind of get an idea of the difference between the two. So this was something that was added in last release. In 2012, what we've added is the ability for you to go in and actually have fine control over that. So I can come down here into my properties, and I can look at the per pixel lighting and actually adjust the amount with the sliders. The other thing that we can do that was added in last release, and we've added further control over, is ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is the ability for parts to cast shadows on each other, or a part's features to cast shadows on itself. So when I turn on ambient occlusion, you'll notice that I get some nice shadowing that starts to take place in a lot of the crevices and in the areas. And again, this is something that we can now control the amount of. So I've got two options. I've got ambient occlusion intensity, which is it's easy enough just to show. As I slide these bars, the intensity of the shadow itself, so you can see as I move it to the right, the shadow gets much, much more intense. And the occlusion radius. What the occlusion radius does is it's how much of the surrounding area is affected. So you'll notice that as you adjust this amount, more and more of the shadow is casted on a larger area. And really the point being is that you've just got control now over both the intensity of the ambient occlusion as well as the radius. So you can really kind of fine-tune this either through the sliders or through numeric input so that you get a nice look and feel to the design. Another enhancement for 2012X is the ability to render the design with glow. And to illustrate this more effectively, I'm going to change the background to black. So let's go in here. We'll change this to black. Let's do both. And when I turn on glow, what happens is it kind of gives a halo effect around the design. In fact, let's adjust the foot color back to gray here. And I can adjust how much glow is happening. So again, down here when I enable glow and I adjust the slider, you can kind of see that I get this almost like this halo effect around the design. And again, you can either control that with a numeric input or through the sliders. So you can just kind of get an idea of what looks good and where I might want it. So again, just some additional rendering tools that were added for 2012. Another nice enhancement is what's called depth of field. Let me just go ahead and change these back to white. What depth of field allows me to do is, if you've ever tried to take a photograph or whatever, and you get kind of that real nice effect where the background or the foreground is a little bit blurry, but one aspect of whatever the picture setting is nice and clear. That's what we can do in Composer now with depth of field. There's a couple things here. So to set the depth of field, again, it's on the Render tab. I'm just going to come up and select the command. And I'm going to place I'm going to choose to then set the focal point. And what the focal point then does is that if I assign it to a component, you'll notice that when I assign it, let's just say to this area right here, the indicator or the dot is red. And what that means is that it's associative, so that if I move the component, the depth of field focus is going to stay the same. You'll see that here in a moment. So I've set the focal point. I want to highlight our handle area so that we get kind of a nice effect on the fact that our company name right there. And you can choose whether or not that little indicator is visible or not through this option. But we've set the depth of field on the handle, and then what you can do is you can come in and just say, I want to high quality render it. This will actually give you the opportunity to see what it looks like. Well, right now when we render that with depth of field, we really don't get a whole lot of effect. And again, this is something that we can control over here on the left. So if I come down here to the depth of field, and let's just set it to like 0.03, and then do a high quality render. Point. It's not rendering right at the moment. Depth of field, focal point. I apologize. I'll have to look into why that's not doing it right off at the moment. Maybe we can circle back around to that. The idea, though, is that the foreground and the background kind of give this blurred effect so that you're focusing in on just a specific area. Some nice enhancements with the render, just to kind of recap, locating everything on the render tab and being able to just add some level of realism to the design, such as shadows, ambient occlusion, per pixel lighting, glow, etc. Another new enhancement for 2012X is the ability for us to come in here and do multiple cutting planes. So let me switch to this view. Here I've got a view set up where I have a cutting plane. And we've been able to do cutting planes for a couple of releases, but the new enhancement for 2012X is twofold. One, if I introduce multiple cutting planes, so if I come up here to my author, and I'm going to say create a new cutting plane. Let's just take it from this direction. Okay, so now we're cutting the design in multiple directions. The enhancement for 2012X is that now when you go to output this as a technical illustration, all of the cutting faces are now supported. Before, only one cutting plane was supported in a technical illustration output, but now when I come in and I do technical illustration, I can both are supported. So let's just do a preview here. Not only are both of them supported, but any capping information that you've added, so the crosshatch lines, the colors, any of that kind of information that you've added to the illustration or to the cutting planes is now supported in the technical illustration output as well. So those are the two enhancements as it relates to technical illustrations and the cutting planes. We now support multiple, and the capping and the hatching that you may apply is also supported as well. All right. Let's also look at a couple other items for this example. Go up here. Let's go back to this guy right here. And the ability to continue to make it easier to create interactive content, it was a new addition to 2012 as well. And the way that we did this is that if you come up to the Author tab under Image 2D, you'll now see there are some standard buttons that have some intelligence built into them. So let's kind of take a look at these. let's say, for instance, I want this to be an interactive set of work instructions, or assembly instructions. On my main page here, I can just draw out, okay, I want a next button, right? And I want a previous button. I'll kind of explain the intelligence that we're building in just a second. Let me go ahead and get them out here on the screen. And then maybe a last button, right? So a couple things here. First off, before we get too far into this, I want you to notice a couple things. Notice that when the buttons are created, they now have a shadow effect underneath of them. That's new in 2012X. When you add panels, 2D image panels, they now have this nice shadow effect that gives them depth. And you can control whether that's on or off in the properties. So over here on the left, we have the ability to control whether or not we want to use the shadow. Okay. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that not so much in 2012X, but in 2012 in general, we can use the same thing that you see in SolidWorks, which is magnet lines. Right? So I can create a magnet line, and I can line these guys up real easily. Right? They just all snap right to the magnet line, which makes it real nice. Likewise, if we were to box select them all, let's make them all the same size, just so that we've got some nice consistency between each of them. So just come over and adjust their size. With 30. There we go. The advantage to the magnet line is as I move it, the items are going to update to reflect that. But the intelligence of this new feature with these 4 standard buttons is that they automatically create the linking between the other views. So if I go into test mode, I'm just going to come down here and exit design mode, I now see that when I hit the next button, it automatically takes me to the next view. The next view as it relates to my view list over here. Now it kind of becomes painfully obvious that I don't have any controls to get back. So let's go ahead and remedy that. All right, we'll go back into design mode, go to our base view, and we'll just select each of those items. Right? I want each of these buttons to show up in all my other views. So I'm just holding down control, selecting each of them. And then I'm going to hold down control and select the views that I want updated. So I want this one, basically any of the views over here on the left, I want those buttons to be added to. What I'm going to do is on my Views tab, I'm going to select to update views with selected actors. Just go ahead and click that. And Composer is going to add the buttons to all my other views. So that now, if I come into the base view, get back to where we started, and we test it out, right? So now I'm going to come in and hit the next button. Everything works as I would expect. All the buttons are there. Now what's really powerful about this is these next buttons have intelligence built in that they literally will just take you to the next view in the list, right? Or if I hit the first, it automatically takes me back to whatever the first view in the list was. And what's really powerful about this is that if you reorder the views, for instance, if I suddenly decide that this view right here, let's move it and drop it down to the very end, right? Just pulling the view down so that it's now the last view in the list. I don't have to do anything with the buttons, right? So now if I hit next, it's going to take me to this view. Right? So it takes care of the intelligence behind the scene. If I want to go to the very last view, it takes me to the one that I drug all the way down here to the bottom. So it's automatically building the intelligence into how these views are linked together to help you, one, create interactive content much more easily, but also to make it easy that if you need to make a change, right, this view suddenly needs to become step 3 instead of step 2, that I'm not having to go back in and adjust a bunch of the links with the pictures. I'm just able to move them around, and the intelligence updates. So, like I said, that's kind of the new intelligence with the 2D planes, the shadows now under the 2D panels that show up, the intelligence behind the linking of the buttons, are some great new enhancements related to 2012. One other enhancement here that we'll show is the output to HTML. What we've done is, now when you come up to File and choose Publish, and we choose the HTML format, you'll see that there are a number of output templates, right? So I can either choose just a real simple version, or I can choose things like I want to see the BOM, I want to see full, meta properties, etc. And what's nice about this is that it actually builds the template for you. So I'm going to come out here to the desktop. Let's just output it. Just throw it in this folder. Save. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that these templates, except for the simple one right here, all require a Player Pro license for the viewer. So just keep that in mind, but it gives you a chance to kind of see what you can do with some of these other templates and really what can be accomplished with Player Pro. So let's go ahead and save this. We'll take a look at what it looks like. We minimize. We'll go out to our saved it, and we'll open it up. See is it formats it really nicely. You get a real nice setup, set of controls, give access to all the information. So not only do I get a nice set of view controls up here, but you'll notice that now as I might click on an item, the metadata is updating in real time. It's highlighting it on the screen. You'll notice over on the right as I'm hovering over the items in the tree, I'm getting an update, right? It's giving me a preview of what that item looks like. I'm getting the meta properties down here on the right to show up. So again, just some nice templates related to the content, helping you create some more interactive content. But just again, realize that Player Pro is required for all of them except the simple one. But again, just making it easier to publish some really nice looking some information. Let's close that down, and let's take a look at just a couple other new enhancements for 2012 as well. Let's go to just another example here. One of the, and this is kind of a small one, but it's helpful, is over in the high resolution area. You now have the ability, or they've moved the ability to create multiple images over to its own tab. So what you'll see right here is I can click on the multiple, and I have two options. One, I now have the ability to take an animation that I may have created and save the frames of the animation out into individual images, JPEGs. And I can set the how many images per second that I want it to output. And then I can either base it on the whole animation, I can base it on just a selection on the time frame, or given seconds. So let's just say, just to show, let's go from like 0 to 3 seconds. I want it to create 15 snapshots for every second. And what happens then is I can just go ahead and hit Save As, and we'll save it into this images folder. And it's going to go out and it's going to start creating snapshot images. And the flexibility that you gain with this is that now I can take the animation and I can put the individual images into some post-processing software like Adobe After Effects or any of those types of programs, where I might want to interlace audio over the top, or I might want to interlace live video, or any number of different effects that I might want to, that are video editing specific. I can now bring these individual images into a program like that and have a lot greater control over them. So now what you'll notice here is that in the folder, I've now got images, basically 15 images for every time frame that outline this animation. So if I bring this up in Photo Viewer and I quickly start clicking on the next button, what you're going to see is that basically you get an animation. Now I'm just clicking through each of the images, but what's happened is that 15 images for every second has been outputted. All right. So again, just providing some more options and flexibility as it relates to post-processing of the content you're creating in Composer. Another thing I'll point out here with the multiple tab is, we've always had the ability to output multiple views. So for instance, in one shot, I want to be able to save out every view that I have over here in my Views tab. What's new for 2012 is that we can provide some intelligence to how those views get named. So what I can do here is I have 3 variables: a file name, view name, and then the other one is index. And I can put these together into a logical sequence. So I can say, for every image, I want it to start the name with the file name. I want it to then go underscore view, and then maybe underscore, I want it to just automatically provide an index number to it. All right. So I can input that in, and then we'll do a save as. And let's just create a new folder in here just so that we don't confuse it with the others. Call it static images. I'm going to hit save, and it's going to go through and output all my views using the naming convention that I created in the multiple views tab. All right. So now if we come into our images folder, go into our static images, here I've got all the images saved out with the file name of the Composer document, the name of the image, and then just indexing. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So again, just another enhancement to kind of help automate some of the output of the deliverables. A couple of usability enhancements related to this is for things like arrows, there's a large variety of new handles that are on the arrows themselves. So what you'll notice here is that when I click on the arrow, there's a couple different handles, right? I can grab onto this, I can extend it. If I add a new handle or a new arrow, in fact, let's just add one live. Get rid of this guy. Add a new arrow in. So you can see that, I've always had the 2 endpoint handles, but now I can control things like the overall width right on the screen, or I can grab onto this guy and adjust the arrow as a whole. Right? I want it to just look a little bit more like that. Or I've got control over the amount of indent on the head. So just some general handles that allow for greater flexibility over the creation of the arrow and modifying it. Another enhancement is related to the creating detail views. So for instance, if I want to, let's say, create a detail view for one of these guys. Let's just use this as an example. If I want to create a detail view, I still come over to the technical illustration and just turn on my detail view. But what happens now is that you've got 2 further controls up here. And what this does is it allows me to say, I want to create a detail view of this area over here. So I can select that component or multiple components, and I can hit this button right here, and it automatically adjusts the focus of the detail view to whatever I had selected, which is really nice. It's a lot easier to create it. And then when I'm happy with it, I can just go ahead and say create. Now I've got my detail view of just that component, and can move it around, can position it, adjust its size, etc. But Again, you see the shadowing effect that we're creating now underneath of the panel. That's consistent through all the 2D panels, and just the nice clean look that's being created. So that kind of gives you an overview of many of the primary enhancements to this release of Composer. If you're not familiar with Composer, Composer is kind of unique because it's basically on about a 6-month update schedule right now, which is slightly different than SOLIDWORKS. So it's lots of new stuff is being added, lots of nice improvements with the program as well, and I think some great ones for this release. So let's do this. Let me go ahead and end the recording, and then we'll take an opportunity